Have you ever stared at the clock in class, counting the seconds until the bell rings? When suddenly, everything changes? The loudspeaker clicks. A voice trembles. This is not a drill. And in that moment, the classroom transforms from a place of learning into a potential battleground. Tonight, we're diving into 3 terrifying true stories where ordinary school days turned into heart-pounding nightmares. These stories aren't urban legends or horror fiction. They happened to real students, to real teachers, and the scariest part? They could happen anywhere. These aren't just about lockdowns. They're about what it feels like when the place that's supposed to protect you becomes the epicenter of chaos. What would you do if someone tried to break into your classroom? If a stranger started watching kids through the windows? Or if the person hiding with you turned out to be the very threat you were hiding from? Strap in, because by the end of this video, you'll never hear the words school lockdown the same way again. Story 1. The Man in the Hallway.
It was a typical Friday. The air was thick with anticipation. Spring break was just around the corner. In room 213, a group of teenagers hunched over their desks, not with stress, but with boredom. Calculus class, 7th period. No test, no pressure, just a relaxed day. The teacher, known for his easygoing attitude, had even put away the lesson plan to play trivia games online. It was one of those rare moments in high school where everything felt light. And then, the loudspeaker crackled to life. The voice of the dean broke the casual atmosphere like a sledgehammer through glass. This is not a drill. Teachers, initiate lockdown protocol. Now. No one moved at first. The words hadn't registered. But as their normally chill teacher jumped to shut off the lights and pulled students toward the corner, the tension turned real. Something was very wrong. Here's where the story becomes almost cinematic in its terror. The fluorescent hum in the room cut out. The back panel of the room, which buzzed constantly, fell silent. Proof that the power had been cut. And then, the screaming started. Not panic from students, but a grown man, roaming the hallways, yelling at the top of his lungs, banging violently on lockers, shouting threats that chilled the blood. "I'll kill all of you." It sounds like a horror movie cliché, right? But this wasn't fiction. Students huddled in the dark, some crying, others frozen. All of them praying the door wouldn't give way. The man eventually reached their door, pounding like a beast trying to get in. When one of the girls screamed, the room plunged into utter panic. No one knew who he was. No one knew what he wanted. And worst of all, no one knew if he was armed. This story highlights a terrifying reality. Many schools aren't prepared for chaos. The narrator later mentioned that their school had no security cameras, no metal detectors, no full-time security presence. The building was essentially open. It's a vulnerability that most of us don't think about until it's too late. When the dust settled, the man was never caught. A janitor found someone sleeping in a storage closet, rumored to be him, with what looked like a .44 Magnum in his pocket. But by the time police arrived, he was gone. Think about that. A man potentially armed with a revolver, hiding in a school storage closet, completely undetected. What if that janitor hadn't opened the door? Story 2. The Man on Halloween. Lunch was supposed to be loud, full of clatter, laughter, the buzz of students escaping the monotony of the classroom. But this lunch period would become something no one would ever forget. It started with a sound, a low, distant boom, then another, and another. It wasn't fireworks. Not this time. Not with the air so tense, and not with the screams erupting from across the quad. Within seconds, chaos exploded. Students screamed and ran. Some sprinted for the exits. Others dove under tables. One group clustered together in a panic, clutching their phones and trying to call their parents. Nobody knew what was going on, just that they were told to move. Now, security and teachers ushered dozens of students into the multi-purpose room, locking the doors and turning off the lights. As they crammed together in silence, some kids whispered theories. "It's a bomb. Someone has a gun. There's a shooter in the science hall." No one really knew the truth. Then the rumors started to narrow down. A man was outside the school, Not in, but right outside the gates, holding something and screaming at the sky. It wasn't a gun, it was a bottle, and what he was saying wasn't directed at students, but at himself. It turned out the man was a registered sex offender with a violent past. He was pacing near the school fence, clearly in distress, shouting that he was going to kill himself. And if the police showed up, he said he'd take them with him. This wasn't the first time students had seen him. Just a few months before, on Halloween, he had walked through the neighborhood in a mask and trench coat, not saying a word, just staring, watching. No kids got hurt that day, so everyone wrote it off as a creepy one-off. But it wasn't. This time, it was serious. And while the man never entered the building, the entire school remained in lockdown for nearly an hour, terrified he'd breached the fence. Police negotiated from a distance. No shots were fired, but the psychological damage was done. What makes this story stand out isn't violence. It's the potential for it. It's the what if that haunts students and faculty alike. In school safety, threats aren't always dramatic. They're not always armed intruders or masked shooters. Sometimes they're people falling through the cracks. Those with untreated mental illness who wander too close to a place filled with children. Most schools don't have a clear procedure for threats outside the building. They prepare for interior threats, active shooters inside classrooms. But what about the guy yelling at the gate? What about the stranger loitering by the track field? Story 3, the basement lockdown. This story doesn't come from a student, but someone who had just graduated college. They'd returned to their old high school, not to visit, but to work. It was their first job post-college, helping with administration and digital records. Their office was in the basement, a space rarely used by students, mostly reserved for storage and a few side offices. It was quiet, too quiet as they would soon find out. One morning, just after first period began, they were organizing paper files when a notification popped up on their monitor. It was an emergency alert, not a fire drill, not a test. Lockdown, shelter in place immediately. No details.
No explanation.
The basement didn't have many places to hide. And worst of all, the office door didn't lock. Panic set in. The narrator pulled the desk against the door as a barricade, then crouched behind filing cabinets. They turned off their phone screen and held their breath. Then, footsteps, heavy, slow, deliberate, coming down the stairs. They tried to stay calm, assuming it was a teacher or security. But the steps didn't stop at the hallway. They stopped at the door. A knock. "Hey, I'm a parent. I got lost. Can you help me?" The voice was too calm, too smooth. And in the middle of a lockdown, no one opens a door during lockdown. That's rule number 1. But the person outside kept knocking, then banging, then trying the handle, and then silence. The narrator stayed hidden for what felt like hours. Minutes later, the lockdown ended. Police had subdued the suspect upstairs. It wasn't a parent. It was the intruder, the one everyone had been hiding from. According to later reports, the man had entered the school with a concealed weapon, pretending to be a parent who forgot something. He bypassed the front desk by being polite, calm, normal, but after getting inside, he changed, pulled a weapon, threatened staff. One teacher was nearly shot. The man was arrested after a brief struggle with police, just seconds after trying that basement door. This is one of those terrifying cases where calm was the weapon. We imagine intruders as frantic, angry, shouting, but predators are often calculated. They mimic normalcy, they act helpful, and that's exactly how they get past barriers. This story hits hard for one reason. The narrator almost opened the door, and had they done so, they likely would not have survived. Takeaway: lockdowns aren't just drills, they're decisions. Let's face it, school lockdowns have become a regular part of life for many students. But behind every drill, every what if, there's a very real danger. These stories aren't designed to scare, they're a call to awareness. Each one teaches us something. Story 1, the threat might already be in the building, and we need systems that can detect and contain that. Story 2, a person on the outside is just as dangerous as someone inside. Mental health threats need to be taken seriously before they escalate. Story 3. Calm isn't always safe. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. What can we do? Educators, parents, students, we all need to be involved in school safety planning. More drills, more security, more mental health intervention, but most importantly, more listening. Listen to the quiet kids, the rumors, the creepy guy from Halloween, because the most dangerous stories are the ones we ignore.
Not every fear comes from the dark. Sometimes, it walks under the buzzing lights of a classroom. The stories you just heard are true, and tomorrow it could be another school, another lockdown. If this video stayed with you, share it. Maybe, just maybe, one day it might make someone think twice. Stay safe out there.